Hello, welcome to today's webinar hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy's Trail Expert Network. My name is Liz Thorstensen. I'm Vice President of Trail Development here at Rails to Trails Conservancy. Our topic today is Trail Development and Technical Assistance Resources. I'll be moderating and co-presenting today's webinar in partnership with Mary Ellen Kuntz, RTC's Manager of Trail Resources, and Yvonne Mwangi, our Trail Development and Trail Link Coordinator. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. First, as you've probably already noticed, attendees have been automatically muted as they've joined to keep the background noise at a minimum, and you will not be able to speak during today's webinar. We'll be keeping an eye out for any technical problems that may emerge on our end, but we will be unable to help with individual technical issues. If you do experience any technical problems, your best course of action is to contact GoToWebinar's free customer support directly or view a selection of help topics at the links shown on our screen right now. I do encourage you to go ahead and copy these down now before we move on from this slide in a moment. If for whatever reason you do lose your webinar connection, please go ahead and re-click on your original login link. You will be able to rejoin the ongoing session at any time. And a reminder that we are recording this webinar, so worst case scenario, you'll always be able to view it later. And even if you do watch the whole thing today, we encourage you to watch it again as a reminder, and we'll have it up on our website and we'll be providing you with that link. We will save time for questions at the end of today. If you have any questions about our resources or other content that you hear about in today's presentation, please type them into the question box located on the right-hand side of your screen at any time. So even as we're going, and if something pops to mind, go ahead and we'll be collecting those questions as we move through the presentation, and then we'll be reviewing them and providing answers at the end. If you have very specific, deeper technical questions, please go ahead and email us with those, and that's provided on the link on your screen. Finally, after today's webinar, you will receive a follow-up email containing a survey asking you to rate the performance of today's webinar. It will also give you more information about RTC's Trail Expert Network with a link to sign up for occasional newsletters from us, and most importantly, a recording of today's webinar. We're going to be aiming for about 45 minutes today, although if we get lots of rich questions from you, we're happy to stay on for the full 60 minutes. So just want you all to be able to plan your time appropriately. So moving on to what we're talking about today. RTC has provided technical assistance to hundreds of communities over the past 34 years. In the early days of RTC, direct technical assistance was a primary focus of the organization as the rail trail movement was just getting started. We answered letters, phone calls, and then we moved into the digital age of fielding many questions by email. As the movement has matured over the years, and as our work with many communities produced a growing archive of examples and resources, we began to shift our efforts to providing technical assistance through our website. Over the past 15 years, we have worked with many trail managers and advocates to produce many of the resources that we're going to discuss with you today. Given the size of our staff, and it's very difficult to be involved in the thousands of trail projects that are popping up across the country, we found that the best way that we can serve folks like you and communities that you're in is by providing tools, resources, success stories that can really help you in your endeavors. We know that the best way to learn is to learn from each other. So today we're going to be walking you through many of those free resources that we have available throughout our website today, and we'll be walking you through those. One of the ways that we hope to provide information is by connecting the experts directly to you. So we launched this Trail Expert Network a few years ago, and it's really intended to be not only a way for you to connect with us at RTC, but a way for you all to connect with each other as a peer-to-peer learning network for trail professionals, volunteers, advocates, and planners. More than 150 50 trail experts registered for this webinar alone. And our trail expert network list, I should mention, has nearly 7,000 people on that list of people who have opted in to be part of this free network. So we know that you have a vast amount of knowledge and expertise just within this group today, and we're hoping that we'll be learning from you as well. So to give us a better sense of our audience today and who's on this webinar, we'd like you to take a moment to click on the poll that we're putting up and click the role that best describes you. So we'll give you a few seconds to choose. So it looks like got two pretty much tied at the top, got 37% from local, regional, state, or federal government folks, 35% from the nonprofit, 14% volunteer, which is a pretty high number, and 9% consultant, 5% other. So thank you so much. That'll help us to attune to our audience today. We know there's such a wealth of knowledge and experience within this group, and again, the larger Trail Expert Network group, and we look forward to growing this and learning from all of you. We're especially excited to tell you more about our new open Facebook group that will allow you to communicate and interact directly with each other more often, and we're going to be telling you about that a little bit later in the webinar. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to our next presenter, Mary Ellen Kuntz.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, there we go. Over the years, Rails to Trails Conservancy has created and curated hundreds of resources for trail experts like yourself. Many of our resources are hosted directly on our website, railstotrails.org. Towards the top of the website, you'll find the menu bar. This will appear on every page of the site, making it easy to navigate back to the homepage or any other page you might be looking for. Under the Resources tab, you'll see the Trail Building Toolbox. This is an incredible resource of articles to walk you through the trail development process from ideation through maintaining the trail and building out a network. After navigating to the Toolbox page, you'll find 8 high-level drop-downs with articles under each. For instance, if you were to click Acquisition, you'd see the selection on your right, including rail banking, acquisition strategies, and more. We've pulled up the rail banking page as an example. On the right of your screen, you can see that we've created a list of resources related for every article. These are useful tools to take a deeper dive into the topic, and you can also consult the resource library for more. Continuing with the rail banking example here, you can use the search function to look for related articles, case studies, and more. By using the resource type list, you can limit your search results to any one of these 9 options. Similarly, we've tagged all the documents in the library to make searching collections a little bit easier. Under the results of your search, like this one for rail banking, you can see that the tags in each article is featured in. You can also find longer case studies and RTC's active transportation listed here, as well as under the Our Work header. If you prefer a more interactive or auditory approach, you might prefer searching our webinars. We store all of our webinars, including those like this one for the Trail Expert Network, here. The videos are stored in reverse chronological order, so you may want to scroll down a bit to see the entire collection. While we're here, let's take another quick poll. We'd like to get a sense of what topics you are interested in for future webinars. I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, so good news. Many of you are interested in trail management and maintenance, as well as equity in the trail planning and programming process. So the good news is that we'll be getting to all of those later this year. Keep an eye on the Trail Expert Network e-news, as well as our website and other things like the Facebook page, to keep an eye out for those and register once they become available. Okay, next up, besides our trail development and resources, Rails to Trails Conservancy also hosts a number of resources for policymakers and advocates on the Active Transportation Policy Hub, also under the Resources header. Here, you'll find access to our database of state policies. This page allows you to search by state, funding mechanism, and more, while also providing you with examples of successful models. If you have legislative success stories, I encourage you to share them with us. We're always looking for more stories and models to add to our story bank. On the Policy Hub, you'll also find links to RTC's research and federal funding database, the Transportation Alternatives Database Exchange, or TRADE. On the TRADE site, we've built state profiles to make funding resources a little bit more digestible. On the right side of your screen is an example from South Dakota, who's done an excellent job obligating available funds the last few years, as indicated by the bar graph on the right side of your screen. On these pages, you'll also find contact information for the state and federal partners. There's a lot of information here, so I encourage you to take a look at these pages after the webinar. Before I turn it over to Yvonne, a quick reminder that our trail blog and magazine are all stocked with mini case studies from around the country and often the world. This page is under the Experience Trails header and has a few categories on the right sidebar for you to limit your search. This page is frequently updated, so be sure to check back soon.
All right, thank you so much, Mary Ellen. I'd like to tell you guys about our early warning system now. And the early warning system is a service of Rails to Trails Conservancy that provides timely information about rail abandonments to allow communities to pursue corridor preservation and future trail use. There are three parts to this. First, we are continuously monitoring abandonment requests filed with the Surface Transportation Board. Then we notify local elected officials and trail advocates, including the 10 list in that state, about the upcoming abandonment and opportunity for public trail use. And finally, we assist these communities to go through the rail banking process, as well as the subsequent stages of trail development. So the Surface Transportation Board is a successor to the Interstate Commerce Commission. It is the regulatory agency that has jurisdiction over economic transactions of railroads, including rail abandonments. The abandonment process begins when a railroad notifies the STB of its intent to abandon a line that it owns. RTC continuously scans for these proposed abandonments so that it can alert local communities as soon as possible. As soon as a railroad files a notice that it intends to abandon, we notify trail advocates and local officials, including city, county, and MPO officials, as well as the 10 lists in the relevant state, so they can move quickly to take advantage of the opportunity for a potential rail trail. We also post the alert on our trail blog, which you can find on our website, railstotrails.org, and you can see a screenshot of that on the slide, as well as to our social media. The notice gives an overview of the abandonment, including the railroad, the docket number, relevant dates and location, as well as a map, and the steps that you need to take if you would like to pursue rail banking. Since 1995, RTC has sent out more than 800 early warning alerts. Federal regulations require interested parties to request rail banking within 30 to 45 days. So without this program, many community leaders would have learned of the rail abandonments too late. Over time, though, we've noticed that abandonments are happening less frequently. You may have noticed disused rail lines in your community that the railroads are choosing to hold on to since they see them as future assets. On the other hand, in a sign of how far the rail trail movement has come, we've observed that more communities and trail groups interested in acquiring a railroad for trail use are approaching the railroad before they file for abandonment. This means that when the railroads file, they're already willing to negotiate for trail use with that city or group. The notices that we send out also include links to tools and resources to help in the rail banking process, including a sample letter with boilerplate language that you can adapt to file for interim trail use, and links to resources already discussed in this webinar by Mary Ellen, including the Trail Building Toolbox, which has a particularly robust corridor acquisition section, as we saw, and technical assistance by email and phone. If you would like to receive early warning system alerts of pending rail abandonments in your area, please join our Trail Expert Network list and we'll give you more information on how to do that soon. So I just want to show you another interesting resource that we have. This is the Rail Trail Statistics page that you can find on our website, railstotrails.org/our work. This rail trail statistics page shows the number and total mileage of open rail trails and rail trail projects in the US and then as for individual states. These numbers reflect the numbers in our database in real time. RTC is made up of a small but mighty and dedicated team. So we rely on reports from trail users, local officials, advocates, folks like you to keep us abreast of the many changes happening with these trails and trail projects. This keeps our data accurate and most helpful to you. If you're curious and want to know more about these trails or trail projects, there's a link on the page that you can use to reach out to us. The final resource I'm going to be discussing is traillink.com. Traillink is RTC's Trail Finder website and mobile app. It hosts information on more than 36,000 miles of multi-use trails. It includes trail names, photos, detailed descriptions, and maps, as well as user reviews. Traillink is a good place to search for trails near you. You can see information and photos of trails, view success stories, and be inspired. In addition, you can also find the contacts of trail managers under related content on the right-hand side of the page. You can also submit trails, photos, and edits to existing trails on Traillink. Now I'm going to throw it back to Liz to tell you about the new Trail Expert Network Facebook forum.
And a friendly reminder that we want you to ask us as many questions in a few minutes as you've got. So please feel free to start typing those in. There's a question box on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar menu. So start sending us those questions. So moving on, as we mentioned earlier, the Trail Expert Network. This is a peer-to-peer learning tool, but also a way for us to communicate with all of you. This is a group of advocates, volunteers, planners that we have grown over the last several years, folks like you that have opted in to be part of this free network, and it's grown to nearly 7,000 people, which is an amazing number of people that are working in this, this rail trail and multi-use trail space. So as part of cultivating this group, we're doing several things. You've probably, if you're part of the list, you've probably received our newsletter. In that newsletter, it's highly curated just for you, for the Trail Expert Network. We pick content that is specific to your needs, blog posts that may be specific to your needs, timely topics that may be coming out of the Surface Transportation Board that affect rail trails, things like that. So keep an eye out for that newsletter if you're part of it. And if you haven't opted in yet, it's completely free, and we'd love for you to opt in to be part of the network. So another part of the network is really pulling our lessons learned that we've learned from many of you, as we mentioned before, and from our programmatic work that spans across our trail development work, our Trail Nation program, which spans 8 different regions of different sizes all over the country, where we're working with hundreds of partners to develop trail networks that connect to each other. And then also our policy work on the local, state, and federal level. So we're pulling all those rich lessons learned from all across the country and feeding them into these webinars, into this curated content that goes into this Trail Expert Network. So a big part of that is what we just mentioned. We're launching a new open Facebook page for the Trail Expert Network. Some of you may be familiar with the Trails and Greenways listserv that was formerly on Yahoo. And we hope that this new resource that, again, is moving over to the Facebook platform will provide you with the same degree of peer-to-peer learning, but in a more updated space. We'll be posting occasional updates to this Facebook group, but really the main purpose of it is to provide an open forum for all of you to connect with each other, but you will be seeing some occasional updates that we will be providing as well. And so you can see it up there on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'd love for you to click on that and please go ahead and opt in and join that group. There's going to be a couple questions that are prompted at you, very easy, very simple questions, and all you have to do is answer those, and then we will click and enable you to join this amazing forum. Also part of the Trail Expert Network is that we do this monthly webinar series on a host of all different topics, and they're all recorded and posted to our website. So you can go back at any point, you can go back multiple years at this point and watch any of that content over again, which we would love for you to do. Upcoming webinars in the coming weeks and months, we have Getting Ready for Opening Day for Trails. We'd love for you to join us and others from across the country to kick off the spring trail season. And we'd love for you to set up events that involve walks or runs or rides on our 8th annual opening day, which is going to be April 18th this year. And to help you prepare, we're going to be hosting this webinar on January 30th, and we'll be sending out some information to you about that, to share resources about this day, help you plan for it, help you market it, and answer any questions you may have about opening day for trails. We're also going to be doing another webinar on organizing around the federal transportation bill on February 19th. RTC's policy team is going to be sharing best practices to help trail managers advocate for federal funding as we work to ensure the reauthorization of the FAST Act, the federal funding bill responsible for distributing transportation funds that we know are critical to rail trails and active transportation projects. And we'll also be telling you what the latest of that bill means for you and your work and for our overall movement. We're also going to be having a webinar on hosting events on trails. We're going to do this in March, and we'll help you prepare for the busy spring and summer season on the trails. And we'll be chatting with key partners across the country to help you think about how to develop great events and market them, whatever the event might be, whether it be a cleanup, a bike to work day, a variety of topics that we'll cover and answer your great questions.
Okay, before we get started with the Q&A, we're going to take a few moments to ask you a couple more quick questions. You should see the first poll on your screen in just a moment, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer again. Okay, thank you for answering. So it looks like many of you responded that you find webinars in the Trail Toolbox and Resource Library really helpful, as well as that Trails and Greenways listserv. So good to know we're doing the right things here. As I've seen, many of you have already requested to join the Trails and Greenways group. The Trail Expert Network. We will get to that shortly after. And are excited to see that you're also interested. So for our next poll, we'll have that open in just a second. Okay, we'll give you about 5 or 10 more seconds. Okay, it's good to see that many of you are interested in continuing to take deep dives into webinars and the Trail Building Toolbox, as well as our resource library. And really nice to see that many of you are interested in increasing your knowledge in the Early Warning System Policy Hub and our new Facebook group. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to Liz to moderate some questions. Okay, first up from there are a couple questions about cost estimates of building and maintaining trails. So Liz, do you want to take that one? So we have a few resources on the toolbox about building out cost estimates and maintaining trails that we can look for. I'm just pulling up this question. And so I would really suggest looking at that, and then maybe if it's a more technical question, emailing us with that on that contact us box. And from Kelly Axman, we have, what is the best way to establish a new rail trail project? Our corridor is not officially abandoned. I'm going to turn that one over to Yvonne, our rail banking expert.
Sure, Kelly. So like I said, when a railroad decides to abandon, it's really an internal decision for them and for what's best for the company. This is a business, so it is profit oriented. So that is usually what motivates a railroad company to decide to abandon officially. Like I said, a lot of communities are reaching out to the railroads. And if maybe you've tried it and haven't had any success, maybe you want to think about what, from the railroad's perspective, would be the benefit of doing that. What can you give them? Is there some kind of political leverage you can use? And then another thing is, because rail trail projects are really led from the ground up, they are locally led, it's important to get in touch with trail groups in your area. So if you have no idea, you can go to TrailLink, find rail trails that are close to you that have gone through this process, maybe find the trail groups that were behind some of these projects.
And I'd also add to that great answer that Yvonne just gave, that if you're not a local planner, it would be great to connect with your local planning team, look at your trail and active transportation plans locally or your bike plan, and see if there's any light plans or serious plans for that corridor, and see what's maybe already happening in the process. If you are a planner, then there's some deeper dive steps you can take. And we walk in the toolbox, we kind of walk you through those step-by-step phases that Yvonne just mentioned, some of those. So it looks like there are some questions about dealing with naysayers, people that may be initially against a trail. I would say without specifics, if there are more specifics, we'd love for those to come through. That would help us. But without specifics, we do have a great page called Working with Opposition and Neighbors on the toolbox on the website. But also I'll say that in the history of the movement, oftentimes the folks that were the biggest opponents, we know, end up becoming the biggest proponents. And it's really about taking the time to spend with people one-on-one in small settings, educating them. If you can bring in other people who have been converted believers, that really can help as well. But it takes time, and it's really about demonstrating, I think, from other nearby examples, if you have any, or even in your state, if you have any, and really taking the time to not be adversarial, but to really bring in those people closer into the fold and talk to them about the benefits and the vision of what you're trying to do. And it's also, a great example for that kind of question about, how you can go on, use the Trail Expert Network Facebook group, get ideas and resources from, from other people as well, not just us.
And it looks like Ty Hauk from Greenville County, South Carolina, has the construction estimate spreadsheet that we'll be providing in the chat, and we'll also make sure to post that to the 10 Facebook group as well. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Ty.
Do we have other questions?
Hey there, this is Kelly Packett, RTC. For the group there, and I can chime in too, we have a question here about winning support from local elected officials.
You want to start with that one, Kelly?
Sure. I would say that it is a topic that we're really interested in presenting as a future webinar. And some of our colleagues have presented on this topic at trail conferences like the International Trail Symposium. So it's something that we would like to get you connected with in our policy, with our policy team. And there are resources in the policy hub that Mary Ellen previewed for you earlier that can help you see how different communities are interacting with their local elected officials. We do a lot of this work through our Trail Nation projects, which are a portfolio of trail network projects across the country. So there's another good resource for you to look into on our website and our project page, and to get connected with some of the local partners there on the ground that are working to connect trail networks, at various scales. But they have lots of knowledge and resources about how to engage local elected officials, either from the municipal level to regional and state level. We've also had a lot of great success with establishing some state legislative trail caucuses. And there's a lot of information about the Ohio State Legislative Trails Caucus in our policy hub. And I'd encourage you to take a look at those resources and see how they've been able to engage a lot of the state legislators in Ohio. I think that they have nearly 40 or 50% of the state legislators in Ohio are involved in the Trails Caucus there. So it's just another good resource within the policy hub that you can check out.
And just to add, that was great, Kelly. And just to add to that, I would say that historically, but even more so recently, trails, we found that on a local level are very bipartisan. And folks across multiple parties are supportive of rail trails, and we still find that true today. And so I would just encourage folks with the whole national movement around health and well-being, especially physical health, not to be afraid that, these are your local elected officials, and to just do that. If you live in a smaller place and you are volunteering, you want to be the person to directly reach out. It could start with you. It doesn't have to be a formal process. You can request a meeting with your local elected official, talk to them about the benefits of trails, and ask them for their support. We see all across the country, we see local elected officials, again, on both sides of the aisle, that get very excited about what trails can do for their community. So I would just say, don't be afraid to take the lead in whatever position, volunteer or professional that you're in.
It looks like we also have a question about working with, excuse me, a variety of trail users, especially hikers and joggers, as well as the equestrian community. At Rails to Trails, we have a long history of working with the equestrian community, especially in the early movement building days of rail trails. So yes, we do really strongly suggest building coalitions for multi-use trails as much as you can. There are sometimes some maintenance questions that I think we address in the toolbox around creating surfaces or using surfaces that meet the needs of all trail users. So I would just take a look at that maintenance page. And then also, I think it's important to include as many people in the conversations as possible.
This is Kelly again. There are a couple specific questions about obtaining railroad valuation maps, and how do you sign up for the early warning system. I'm going to let Yvonne talk a little bit about how to sign up for the early warning system and what that looks like. But just to answer the couple questions here about railroad valuation maps, those are kind of the original maps that were drawn up for the railroad when it was being built. And you can often find those in your county records or registrar's office. So it might mean getting in touch with, a city or county planner to help you navigate those records. If they're not available locally, you can also contact the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. And they have a request system that you can reach out to them and provide some information about the location and railroad that you're looking for, and they can often help provide you with a digital copy of the map. There is a fee associated with it, and it may take some time. If you're local to the DC area, you can go to the National Archives. If not, you can use their online system to request information like that. But a lot of times you can find those historic maps within your own city or county's records.
Yeah, and if you're interested in getting, early warning system alerts, you only need to sign up for the Trail Expert Network. It is a service of the Trail Expert Network. And you can do that by going to our website, railstotrails.org. If you go to resources and then toolbox, sure. Yeah, you can find a link to sign up for the Trail Expert Network, and you can get the alerts and so much more.
And I think we just put that in the chat box directly for you that you can click on in the chat box as well. So there's a question about trail signage vandalism, and I think Kelly's going to take a stab at starting that question.
Sure. So we do have some resources that kind of get at this in the toolbox. I think it's in the public art article in there. But oftentimes trail managers do deal with vandalism to signage or other maybe public art installations or murals along their trail. I think that there are different approaches for each trail depending kind of on its location and characteristics. We know that a trail project that we were working on in DC, once it was built, had a lot of issues with vandalism, with graffiti on a lot of the new light poles that were installed right as the trail was built. We had to be really vigilant with spray painting over top of them, so much so that it was kind of maybe a daily or weekly practice until eventually the tagging just stopped. That doesn't help you very much with signage because I realize that it's complicated and expensive to try to reinstall. But I think that what we learned from our experience on the Met Branch Trail was a lot about engaging the various communities around the trail, creating opportunities for neighbors and nearby residents to be engaged in things like the signage design and artwork that went up along the trail. So there was a really great sense of ownership there, and we saw a lot of those issues kind of decreased, I think, as more people got involved, and it kind of created a nice corridor of public art along the trail. That's a tough, dealing with vandalism to signage, and maybe you're talking more about signage, somebody removing signage that you've placed up. I think this is a really great question to ask the new Facebook group. I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with this and might have suggestions of your own. So I encourage you to join the Facebook group and, ask this really knowledgeable group.
I just saw that we had another question about gaining support from elected officials. We do have under the organizing header in the toolbox, we have 2 toolbox articles that might be helpful to you. One specifically about engaging the community more, and that one's building community support, as well as a second article, building relationships with public agencies and officials. We've seen a lot of success from organizations that, as I think Liz pointed out, we've had some situations with people building rail trails and other multi-use trails that have gotten the support of their local elected officials, who have become some of the biggest supporters of their trail projects. So I'd take a look at that, and I believe both of those articles have some really good resources for local examples about those two.
Hi, this is Kelly again. There's another question here that also gets at what do you do when you're just kind of first starting out? It's from Samantha Winter in southern New Mexico. She said that there aren't a lot of rail trail projects near them, but they've been in touch with a group in the northern part of the state that's done some trail development, and they're wondering where to start. They have located a rail corridor that's 27 miles long, but some of it goes through private land, and wants just to kind of know where they start. So we get this question a lot, and we often try to understand more about what's going on with the railroad corridor and its status. So if it was officially abandoned by the Surface Transportation Board, there will be different kind of actions that you take based on the status of the corridor. So for a question like this, where you've got a great long distance corridor, some of it goes through private land, just kind of wondering where to start, I would always suggest, first that the trail advocates do some really good research on the trail corridor itself, understand what the ownership and the status actually is, because that's going to give you, an idea of where and how you move forward. If it's a rail corridor that is almost exclusively owned by private individuals, and especially on a long corridor like this one, it will often be really difficult to patch together that corridor again if it has been abandoned. So that would be a process of reaching out to individual private property owners and working together with them to see if there's an interest or willingness in them allowing access to their land for trail use. But again, you need to kind of get your research done first and understand what it is you're dealing with. I think it's always a great idea to look in some of your local and regional plans to see if the trail project had ever been identified before by maybe your city, county, or regional planners. Maybe it would exist in a long-range transportation plan, or it might exist in like a bicycle master plan. That would also just help you understand if there's ever been interest in it before, and if so, who was kind of involved in getting the idea off the ground. And I think it's always important to reach out to your local government staff too, and just to try to understand if there are any plans to include the corridor, in some of their future bike ped or trail plans as well. But again, it kind of all depends on the status and ownership of the corridor, where you go from there. And I did just want to mention, that we do have all of these resources available for you on the website. You can always go to the Contact Us tab on our website and send a message to the trail development team if you have really specific questions like this, or if you have a question about a very specific corridor. We're happy to take a look at it and let you know what we know about that corridor, and if we can connect you with others in your area as well.
It looks like we've got just a few more questions coming in. If you have any additional questions, please send them in now. Next up, it looks like we have a question about funding for maintenance work. There is an article on the toolbox page about that. Our general recommendation, I think, is to make sure that any maintenance you're expecting from your trail is included in the initial cost estimates, because it's much easier to get that funding at the get-go than later on down the road. It also depends on kind of who's managing your trail. If it's a locally managed trail by, say, your county, the county parks and recreation department might have some of that equipment for you. But I think it's a little specific about the trail itself, but I would recommend reaching out to either trails near you or to your local municipality to see if there are resources available there.
And we have a question about rail with trail, and I am going to scoot that one over to Kelly as our resident expert.
Hey there. So this is from Denise Horner, and she wanted to know if we're aware of trails beside active rails. And the answer is yes, we do. We are, very excited by the rail trail movement, in that a lot of communities are beginning to take advantage of active railroad corridors to develop trails. In fact, we've seen it, kind of as a growing trend, especially over the last 10 or 20 years. We have a lot of resources on our website. So in the toolbox, there is an entire summary dedicated to rails with trails. We also, as Yvonne mentioned, have a database of rail trails, greenways, and rails with trails. So included on the resource page in the toolbox is a list of the more than 300 rails with trails across the country. We were very happy to be able to work closely with the Federal Highway Administration last year to interview dozens of trail managers that have trails located in and along active rail rights of way. And we're looking forward to FHWA releasing a national study on the topic within the year. So look forward to that from us. I see that a link to our resources was provided in the chat box here. We are happy to talk with you more, again, if you have a question about a specific corridor in your community and, kind of the feasibility of rail with trail. As you'll find out in the resource section, a lot of times it kind of depends on what railroad we are working with and if the trail corridor is located within the right-of-way or adjacent to it. So lots of factors that play into kind of how complex a project might be. But a lot of great precedents out there for you, and we're excited to see more and more communities do this.
Thank you, Kelly. And we have a question about using economic development tools like tax increment financing and bonds at the community level to help support financing trail development. So I'm going to take that one. I used to work in economic development. So in terms of tax increment financing, I would say you really need to look at your state and what the structure of and use of tax and increment financing in your individual state is. I would say that we have looked at this over the years, and we do think it is a very good tool for trail development, but we find that it is very underutilized. And that really comes down to, like, in your given state, has it been promoted, for that kind of infrastructure, for trail infrastructure in the past or not? That's not to say that it's not possible. It just doesn't tend to get highlighted in that way. I know that the state of Maine has looked at this, and so if you want to shoot us an email, we'd be happy to send you a little bit that we've seen about that in Maine. And then in terms of bond, I wanted to bring up Great Rivers Greenway, which is in the St. Louis region. And that is a case where they did have a public decision that they were going to self-tax themselves as part of funding their greenway system. And it's been very successful. It's a great, very well-sustained organization. They have a wonderful trail network that's growing. And so if you Google greatriversgreenway.org, and we'll put that in the chat box as well, greatriversgreenway.org, you can take a look, and that's a really great success story of looking to the public to make a decision if they want to self-tax and invest in their trail network, which is a highly valued asset of that region. But if you have other questions about TIF, that is such a lesser utilized tool in our space, but please go ahead and email us or me directly, and I'll be happy to dive in deeper on that one as well.
We also have a question about whether or not municipalities need to take rail trails into consideration for insurance. Generally, if it's publicly owned land, there usually is a public entity with umbrella insurance that will protect those activities and facilities. However, if it is a publicly or a privately owned land or trail, they would need to purchase similar comprehensive liability insurance. We do have in the toolbox a great resource, the liability and trail insurance page under the management and maintenance header. And within that, you'll find a really great resource, the Rail Trails and Liabilities, a primer on trail liability issues and risk management techniques that is also hosted within the resource library that can help to answer those questions in a little bit more detail. That actually might be our last question.
Last call for any questions that you want to send us.
I do see one quick question here from Michael Kowalczyk, and he asked, what funding do you suggest for the purchase of equipment for trail maintenance work? So just wanted to say here that the Recreational Trails Program, which is a federal program that is administered usually through state departments of transportation, is funding for equipment is an eligible activity under the Rec Trail program. I do know from just some experience with local partners and some of you that are on the line that there have been difficulties in utilizing Rec Trail program funds for equipment due to the Buy America Act, which requires that most or all of the equipment is made entirely in the United States. And there are very few manufacturers that produce equipment that are typically used on trails with entirely products made in the US. So we have seen that some applicants and folks who have been awarded Rec Trail program funding successfully apply for a waiver from their state FHWA division office so that they can purchase other types of equipment. I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just saying I know that this is kind of an issue that has come up recently. So that's one, again, federally funded program that's administered through the states that you can tap into for trail equipment. And, we also have been seeing some examples where communities are getting creative with sharing equipment among and between local municipalities and counties. Sometimes there are, difficulties in transporting the equipment, but it's something to maybe consider just to kind of take inventory and stock of what exists around you, in, either within your own city or county parks and recreation department, or maybe a neighboring county. I know that other sources for maintenance equipment are through private foundations. You could also look into corporate sponsorship for those. But again, this is another really, really great question for the larger group. We'd love to learn more about how all of you are paying for maintenance equipment and paying for the maintenance of the maintenance equipment too.
And as Kelly just alluded to, this is actually a topic that we're going to be looking to the Trail Expert Network for, just to learn more, because we hear so much about maintenance challenges. But we're trying to, because rules and strategies and policies are so different across all 50 states, we're trying to, over the next year, gather more information about that and just really understand what exactly the challenges are and get into deeper specifics. So we actually did one webinar on that already. We'll be doing at least one more, but maybe more than one. And we'll probably be reaching out to this Trail Expert Network on our newsletter or in our Facebook group, and just asking you some more questions so that we can get a better sense of exactly what Kelly just said. What are the specific funding challenges? What are the other challenges? And so that we can then start to determine, what resources we can gather and provide and help find solutions in partnership with all of you, and start to share more of that specifically around this topic of maintenance, which is so challenging for so many of us in the trails world.
Okay, that looks like it's our last question, and we're at almost an hour. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and participants for their participation and sharing of your expertise today. I hope you found the presentation both informative and useful for your work. Again, you'll be receiving a follow-up email shortly with this webinar and a feedback survey, as well as a link to the recorded version and a PDF of the slides. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.